goodness.
May I ask you, if you don't mind, in the last 6 rows, if you can move forward so it's much easier for the speaker if everybody's here toward the front. And I thank you. Here. And our interpreter is Kristen Grace, and we thank you, Kristen, for being here. About 20 years, and I don't remember when it was exactly, I had the privilege of meeting a fellow named Bernard Rapoport, about whom I had heard. And before I introduce him, we were fortunate to have his wife, Audrey, here. Audrey, stand up and take a bow, please. But I've had heard he was an unusual person. I discovered that through an unusual series of events. I've had the chance to know Warren Buffett for about 10 years or so, and we get together periodically. And Warren Buffett, mentioned we're going to have Bernard Rapoport here. And he said, you know, I've never met him, but I really admire him. He breaks the mold. And my observation is, for the students who are here, people who are successful break the mold. They don't do just what you might expect. He has been extremely successful in the field of business. He's the founder, co-founder of American Income Life Insurance Company. He is, he has a passion, not only in the business world, but a passion for justice, passion for social issues in our society. We've had in this series B, and his friends call him B rather than Bernard. The last speaker was Studs Terkel. We had William Warfield here, the previous speaker. We've had a series, as some of you know, a series of speakers ranging from Pat Robertson to several Republican members of the Senate to others, and now B. Rapoport. Not only is he the founder and chairman of the board of American Income Life Insurance, he was until, I think you're no longer chairman of the board of the University of Texas Board of Regents, but he is also chairman of the board for American Friends of Tel Aviv University. His interests are Jeffersonian. It is a real pleasure to bring to you here Bernard Rapoport. B, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. First, to be together with Paul again, and I've always been a little aggravated with him because I thought that he would have made one of the great presidents of our country, and I was very active in his campaign, and he might have been president, but he didn't listen to me like he should. But I gave him the advice on what it took to be president, but he didn't take it. But anyways, and the country is poorer for it. But I want to tell you, share with you, and especially for young people, but I have to confess one thing. I have two granddaughters. One is Emily, who's 12, and you'll hear a little bit more about her, but she's going to be a poet laureate. And I have Abby, who's 15, who's going to be president of the United States. And she has a little card that says Abby Rappaport, future president of the United States, subject to voter approval. So I know a lot about young people, I really do. And so Abby called me one day and she said, Grandpa, I have to write an essay on the person who's influenced my life the most, and it's you. And my head swelled up. But then she said, Grandpa, I don't like everything you tell me. Now, I'm talking to you, a lot of you young people here, and I want to tell you some things. You may not like everything I'm going to tell you, but it is predicated on 82 years of living. I think that if I had to start the world over again, I would have 11th commandment. It would be the first commandment. And it would be from Emerson's quotation where he said that character is that which can do without success. I begin too with a close of what I want to share with you this afternoon. And that is that if the good old days aren't tomorrow, we are indeed a failing society. I was most fortunate. I was raised a Marxist. My father was in the Russian Revolution of 1905, sent to Siberia, escaped after 7 years, and came to America. For him, if Karl Marx didn't say it, it wasn't true. And those are my first remembrances. As I recollect my father's assessment, it was always that the rich were, in Yiddish, Prostaleiten, common people. Common because they cared only about money and not about the ills of our society. And three things my father accentuated. First, to protect your name, never to let a book out of your hands, and have a sense of outrage and injustice. See, being a Marxist is very comforting because you have all of the answers and you're never in doubt. And I wish I could still be one. But then something changed, and I came home one day and I said, Papa, I'm no longer a Marxist. And he asked why, and I responded, well, you told me never to let a book out of your hands, and I came across Thorstein Veblen, and Papa had never heard of him. So I said to him, Papa, I think Marx is wrong when he says that the ends justify the means, because it's really the means that determine the ends. And he looked at me with puzzlement and reacted as a devout Jesuit who was persuaded to think there was in fact no God. I didn't influence Papa very much. He died in 1966, content with his Marxist commitment. Michael Sandel, in his book, Discontent and Democracy, talks about the procedural republic and affirms that in our country, we must strive to be a procedural republic and be concerned about procedure even more than goals, because how we get to those goals is what's going to be all important. One thing my father shared with me, and I wanted you to understand that people as old as I am, that came from immigrant parents, were fortunate because he created with me a passion for self-service that I owed this society. I owed this society, and it was not an option. It was a must. I owed this society. He didn't like rich people. He really didn't. He thought they were crooked, and he thought they were illiterate. And he never had trust in them. And so I started building a company. I came to him one day and I said, Papa, I want to tell you something. I'm building a company. I could get very rich. I said, how about me? And with tears in his eyes, he said, I couldn't even trust you then. So I sit here before you. In his eyes, I'm not a success. Well, the way it was, 1,000 square foot house in which we lived from 1927 on. because the house we'd lived in previously. Well, it's a sad story. I came home when I was 5 or 6 years old, and the furniture was in the street. We'd been dispossessed. So you think I had a tough childhood? Well, I didn't. Because we were a family. And in this 1,000-square-foot house, there was one bathroom for 4 people, and that was plenty. In this small house, there was one room, and it was filled with nothing but books. No money for such things as eating out or buying things. There was a front porch. Lemonade always on that porch, cookies, waiting for the neighbors to come by. Sitting on the swing, talking, exchanging ideas. And more importantly, almost every night, 12 or 13 radical Jewish families would come to our house, and the men would sit around the table with an intent of solving all the problems of the world. If there were thoughts that dominated everyone's thinking, it was in that group. It was concerned with inequality and economic insecurity and social injustice. Today you see charts that show if you have a high school education, your potential earnings will be X, and if you have a BA degree, 2X, and a master's degree, 3X, and a PhD, 4X. Well, there was a difference then. And remember my opening statement, those good old days in which old people like me to refer, a lot better when reminiscing than they were in the experiencing. And truthfully, it was education that was instilled in us for one purpose, for knowing more. Not for having more, but for knowing more. And that is true. We were more heuristically trained. We were taught the joy of discovering things for ourselves. As you know, Albert Camus said that poverty is imprisonment without a drawbridge. But you're lucky. You are in that drawbridge when you're in Southern Illinois University, because education is that drawbridge, and it is the only drawbridge. In Rich Tillman's book on Veblen, he said, and if you've never read Thornton Veblen, he was an institutionalist. And as I read these words to you, I want you to really have a deep resolve that you're going to listen very carefully, because these are words that changed my life, and I want to share them with you. Veblen believed that financial manipulation and decisions and plans made for purposes of pecuniary advantage alone, for example, mergers utilized for the purpose of capturing cash flows in order to finance the debt payments generated by takeovers themselves for the purpose of financial empire building, subverted and sacrificed the production of goods. Now, as you read the papers today, you see Pfizer and Warner Lambert in a merger. And what's the purpose? The purpose is they can eliminate 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 jobs. They're not going to produce any more goods, but they're going to save $1.5 billion in payments to working people. Now, it's okay if you're a stockholder, but it isn't quite okay if you're one of the people that are going to be displaced. You know, someone said, we virtually have no unemployment. So many jobs have been created. And the other person asks the question, How many jobs do you have? Because in our society today, so many people can't make a living with one job and have to have two. Well, Veblen's writings began in the very early 1900s. His prescience anticipated the world that you and I know. The financial manipulations that he described almost 100 years ago are increasing today at an exponential rate. I was fortunate because as a student at the University of Texas in the late 30s, I had as one of my professors, Clarence Ayres, who shocked all of us who thought economic theory was invented by Adam Smith. For Adam Smith, the market mechanism was one that would ensure a just economic system. Ayres taught that the truth in Veblen's conclusion that whatever allocation occurs in any society is a result of the organizational structure of the society, to wit, its institutions. Perhaps the reason that 1/3 of our population is better off today than they were previously is because for that group, for that 1/3, income is increasing. But 2/3 of our population are either stationary or in a worsening situation. But I'm not here to talk to you about Veblen or Marx or any economic theory. One of my favorite philosophers is Descartes, because he wanted to believe in God, and so he did. But from that point on, he said everything that he believed would have to be proven. So to the subject at hand, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, you can look with nostalgic, realistic nostalgia about the pre-computer age, and yes, even prior to television. Because those were the days when people needed one another. The emphasis in those days was not on opulence, because that wasn't any option. That wasn't anything that we gave thought to. That was too impractical. When I graduated from the university in 1939, if someone had offered me a job for $200 a month for the rest of my life, I would have signed that contract in blood. And so would virtually everyone who graduated in my class. Those were the days where there were no instant millionaires. There were more horses and buggies when I was growing up than there were automobiles. When I crossed the street with my mother, when I was a child, and she would hear horses coming, she'd start shaking. For her, when horses came, it meant the Cossacks were coming. And it meant that she and the family had to go down in the cellar and stay there till they left. So I've had this understanding of injustice and prejudice long before young minds should have even had such cluttering. But again, the camaraderie that existed among this small group is wonderful to remember. There was always agonizing, and there was real fears as to what the future held. Because in those days, there was no Social Security, no health insurance. We've had no real breakthroughs in our society since the Roosevelt years. Real breakthroughs. Real breakthroughs. Institutional breakthroughs, like Social Security, unemployment compensation, Fair Employment Practices Act. Those were innovative, those were new. They were created with, without reference to the existing institutions. I remember when I was 13 years old, I was run over by a car. And as I said, we were very poor, so we didn't have good doctors. And so my leg was short. I'm sure that there are a lot of unpaid hospital bills and doctor bills from that series of events when I was recovering. I don't think I'd ever even heard about the Dow Jones average until I was almost 30. Who cared? Who owned stocks? No one. Who thought of getting rich? Who cared as long as there was enough to eat and be housed? And so what about today? I read in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Sites or betting fans will buy time with top jocks. And what this company is starting now. It's probably a company you ought to buy stock in, probably make a lot of money. What they're going to do is they're going to line up a bunch of athletes. And one of the deals is going to be, there's no telling what bidders might pay for such exclusive T-to-Ts. They're going to buy 4 hours of one of these one of these players. There's no telling what bidders might pay for such exclusive T-to-T, what bidders might pay for such an exclusive opportunity. But a company says a round of golf with Mr. Woods near his Florida home could sell for $350,000. You think about all the little children that are not well housed. You think about all of the children who don't have an opportunity for education. And if that isn't sickening, I don't know what it takes to arouse us. I don't know why we don't get mad. Well, today, we have more money than we need. Sure, I made sure my granddaughters and my son aren't going to have any financial concerns. So, in today's method of evaluating we're a successful family, my son's a professor. And for me, there's no higher calling. That is the single greatest, well, no, a kindergarten teacher is the single most important person in our society. And then the first grade is a little bit less, and it goes all the way up. And you who are professors are a little down in the, because the kindergarten teacher is number one. Anyways, what bothers me is I have done nothing to ensure their happiness, because that's something that comes from within. I've given them all the admonitions that my father instilled in me, and it's up to them to either accept or reject. I tell them about the old days, the trials and the tribulations and the good parts, and guess what? They have the same problems, the same concerns quantitatively as those of us who were raised in the 20s. They just have a different bent. Tom Brokaw automatically is one of my favorites because he wrote this book on the greatest generation. And since I read the book, and so since I was part of that generation, I just figured he was talking about me, although we've never met. But anyways, generations. I told you I founded a very successful company. But I'm going to tell you why it was successful. It started in 1951. I was 33 years old. There were about 30 presidents of brand new life insurance companies starting in Indianapolis at that time. And we sat around this room and we talked about this generation. This is 1951. That they were lazy, they were no good, they were bums. That this generation didn't want to work. They want everything handed to them. It was one of those meetings where there was total unanimity. And the question we pondered was, How could we be successful if we didn't have the right people with which to work? But we were content. We had condemned the current generation, and we left satisfied. I woke up in the middle of the night, I'll never forget, and realized what a bunch of jackasses we were or were. This generation was not better or worse than mine, just different. And you young people, your generation isn't better or worse than mine, it's just different. For people in my generation, a car was a luxury. So in order to sell insurance, you would go door to door. For this generation, the cars were not a luxury, but a must. But anyway, to make a long story short, I realized very quickly that this generation was not going to accommodate to me, I had to accommodate to it. And because of that change in thinking, we introduced new marketing methods and enabled us to build a very successful company. So it is with those who are in their 40s and 50s today, the so-called leaders. They look at you and wonder what kind of generation you're going to be. But I'm here to tell you, each generation gets better and better because you're smarter and smarter. But there is one problem I do not understand. Veblen's theory relative to institutions and our failure to really comprehend the significance of his seminal thinking is causing some problems that makes you wonder, can our civilization survive forever? There's nothing that says that it has to be, because Dennis Gabor said, let us face the problem squarely. We cannot stop automation and mechanization of manual and clerical work because it is a powerful means of increasing the wealth and well-being of our industrial civilization. But if we do not stop automation and mechanization, we cannot stop the lowest intelligence brackets from becoming unemployable on the production line. We then have the choice of bracketing them with the lunatics and feeble-minded with whom our society already maintains at the taxpayer's expense. Think about this. What kind of society do we really want? We have to have the will for a better society. I'm going to share a little prejudice I have here. YK2. Trillions of dollars were spent on that particular problem. Trillions of dollars. Worked. We solved the problem. Well, what about the poverty that exists in our society today? The people that really don't have a chance. The children that raised with single parent. The children that are not well fed. The children are not well clothed. Why does that problem exist? Because we don't have the will to do socially what we are determined to do economically. YK2 was solved because it would have affected us economically. Now we know that the population of our country will be increased at a rate of 50% in the next 50 years, and another 50% in the ensuing 50 years. We are going to have a 100% increase in population in the next 100 years. Now, our means of transportation today primarily are the automobile and the airplane. Now, how many highways can we really have? We live in a small community of Waco, Texas, which is on I-35, and it starts in Laredo, Texas, and goes all the way to Minnesota. It's so crowded that a trip, which normally would take an hour and a half, will take 2 to 2.5 hours. And we need fast trains in our country. Now, why don't we have them? Well, the airline industry fights it, the concrete manufacturers fight it, and the automobile manufacturers fight it. They want more roads, the airplanes want more subsidies. Now that's what you call institutional lag, cultural lag. We sit here like a bump on a log and let these vested interests thwart the meaningful progress that is needed. Paul Simon will tell you that if he hadn't spent as much time talking to these lobbyists, he might have been a lot better senator. And he was as great a senator as ever sat in the U.S. Senate. But you see, it's never been any different in any society. The vested interest groups thwart progress. Prior to the industrial age, the lords of the manor wanted more and more land, more and more serfs. And then came the Industrial Revolution. And what did it bring us? Child labor and the very worst working conditions with no consideration for the worker. Well, we made some progress in those areas, but we still have a long way to go. So, what I pass on to you? Well, when I can't say it as well as I'd like, I go to someone who can. And so I share with you, in closing, what Ortega Gasset said in his book, The Revolt of the Masses. For me, then, nobility is synonymous with a life of effort, ever set on excelling oneself and passing beyond what one is to what one sets up as a duty and an obligation. In this way, the noble life stands opposed to the common or inert life, which reclines statically upon itself, condemned to perpetual immobility, unless an external force compels it to come out of itself. Hence, we apply the term mass to this kind of man, not so much because of his multitude, as because of his inertia. Thank you.
Bernard Rapoport to take the time to come here to Southern Illinois University. What a great opportunity for you as students and faculty and people in the community to be here. Listen to someone who, as Warren Buffett says, breaks the mold. Questions? Quietest group of students I've ever seen assembled here. You stunned them here.
Well, you know, what John Dewey said, every government needs a minister of irritants.
What's your... Yes?
You managed to get a business started. You decided to found it.
I didn't-
Tell a little bit about your business.
Oh,
How you founded it. and
I started in 1951. If I'd had any brains, I'd known you couldn't do it. But I have a theory called the PI theory: passion, integrity, and energy. And so when I started the company, we didn't do very well at the beginning, and I realized something was missing. And when most people start something, they try to emulate what the big companies do. So there are really only 10 insurance companies in the United States, size-wise, like Metropolitan, Prudential, all fine companies. And you have a couple of thousand minnows out there. So I decided that if you're a minnow, you're not going to go where the whales eat. And the major companies did not want to deal with blue-collar people. Well, I was raised with blue-collar people, and my closest friends were always either teachers, or in those days, all the college liberals went into the labor movement. So I had all these friends in the labor movement, and I called a couple of the labor leaders, and I said, look, I'm starting a life insurance company, and I want it to be unique. I want it to be the only union life insurance company where the person that sells an application is a union member, and the person that issues a policy in the home office will be a union member. And because of that, the unions opened their doors, and we had a marketing system wherein we were able to build almost right from the start. We were very fast growing right from the start because we had an idea that was not an idea that most people in the business world would have accepted, because you know about, and we are a company that is union all the way through, and it has so many advantages because, see, when you have a union, if your worker is dissatisfied, they have the grievance procedure through which they can go. So you have a process of letting the steam off. And so that's how we built it. That was the way.
And you have, how many people have life insurance through your?
About 2 million. Oh, it's a $1 billion company today. But just starting with an idea, that was it. And it,
Idea plus the perseverance and the energy of it.
But if you'll just remember that pie theory, whatever you want to do, I don't care whether you want to be a professor, whatever you want to be, the thing, if there's a lack of anything today, as there was even when I was growing up, I think the greatest lack we have is passion. I mean, you just really have to have, you have to be able to get mad, and you have to be able to get excited, and you have to be concerned, and you have to really believe. You know, the Indian philosopher said, believing may be difficult, but the need for believing is inescapable. And you've got to do those things. You built a business, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. Early on, you put proceed in your lecture.
Yeah.
Procedure on a very high platform. That was all important. Did you apply that to the current dilemma in the political sphere, even to the president?
I'm going to tell you this. You know, there's a wonderful story about Teddy Roosevelt. He has a crowd about like this, and he said, now, if there's anyone that's not a Republican in this hall, please raise your hand. So one kid raises his hand like this. He says, I don't understand, how come you're not a Republican? And the kid says, look, my father was a Democrat, my grandfather was a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat. And Roosevelt says to him, he said, well, look, what if your father had been a horse thief? What if your grandfather would have been a horse thief? What would you have been then? He said, I'd have been a Republican. So, I think that really and truly that I was reading the biography of Isaac Newton. If he had died at 25, he still would have been one of the greatest people that ever lived. He had done all of his theories by the time he was 24, 25 years of age. But he just had a passion to do it. But that's what I see. I really do. That's it. Yes.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
What's your take on American companies taking their factories overseas?
Do what?
The American companies taking their factories overseas?
Yes. Well, see, take globalization. Globalization is a wonderful thing. NAFTA was a wonderful thing. Except that every time we think in terms of progress, the little guy's getting killed so that we can have this progress. In globalization, what you do is, it used to be that you could not export capital. And today, you can export capital. The way they do accounting and business today, they have this one-time write-off. And if you got a factory, this a $200 million factory right here in Illinois, and you are employing 5,000 people, you can take that factory to China. You can write off $1 billion one time, and you will double your profits or triple your profits as a result of that. Now, I'm for globalization, but I'm for people before I'm for globalization. And so this is something that we've become enamored, and we start worshiping the wrong things. And whenever, one of the things that bothers me about this election, I don't see anybody discussing any real issues. I mean, I don't care whether, I don't care about somebody's past in terms of what they've ever made love to a girl or something. I'm not interested in that kind of thing. What I'm interested in is what do they believe, and what is their program, and what kind of institutional changes are they willing to make, and they. I mean, I don't see any issue discussion. I don't see any changes that people are talking about. I mean, we act like things are great for everybody, and they aren't great for 2/3 of the people.
You're hearing all kinds of unorthodox things. What's your advice? A lot of young people, a lot of students here. Some of them business majors.
Well, I would tell you this, if you want to go in business today, well, you know, I was chairman of the Board of Regents at the University of Texas System, which is probably the largest system of all, about 150,000 kids. And of course, the business school, we have a tremendous business school. Well, you asked me a question, so I'm going to have to be honest about it. I think business schools are wonderful. I think they're wonderful. But I just think for a business school to let a child graduate without at least 9 hours in philosophy and political science, and you just, there's a lot more to business than just making money. And there's a lot more in business than knowing how to read a financial statement. Because what you really have to, if you're going to be a good citizen, you have to understand what goes in the making of those figures that's on that financial statement. Did you really provide a meaningful service? Were the people that were involved in the process, did they have opportunity? I mean, these are the kinds of, and that's why I think that I would like for business schools, and I tried to get that done. I was not successful, but I think that is something that ought to really be a requisite. I just don't think you can be a good business person unless you have some social concerns and social considerations. That's just my prejudiced point of view.
I could just add, and I
Yeah.
shouldn't be taking time
What?
to be my investments are very modest. But one of the things I do is I look at people who are leaders of business, who are responsible citizens, and who are willing to do a job in their community or with our society, and I buy stock in that company. And whether it's just pure luck or what, I've been able to do better than Dow Jones and Standard & Poor's by buying in that way. I think his advice for people who want to get into business is be broad in your interests and in your concerns. If you focus only on that business, you may be modestly successful, but I don't think more than modestly successful. Is that a fair?
Yeah, how many of you would like to have your own business? Let me see your hand. Okay, well, let me just tell you, I'll tell you the other thing. If you're going to be successful in business, in my view, the things I said to you, but the most important thing you have to do is you have to be perceived as a person who has a generosity of spirit. Now, I mean, as I told you, we're a large company, and we got a lot of people that work with us. But they really have a sense that they're going to be fairly treated, that they're going to be fairly compensated, and that they have access, whether it's to me. One of the guys calls me on the one of the agents called me on the phone the other day. This is really a true story. Calls me on the phone, he says, "Mr. Rapoport, is that really you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Say the truth." He says, "I didn't think I'd get you. I didn't have anything to say." I said, "Don't feel honored. Anybody can get me on the phone. Just call." So but that, you have to have a generosity of spirit. You really have to, you know, the days when you could be a Simon Legree, I mean, those days are gone, thank goodness. I mean, you're not going to build anything with that kind of attitude. And I think that this is a question, I've talked to many classes, hundreds of classes, because I love to do that. But usually when I start with a class, the first question I ask them is this. Now, if you could make $40,000 a year and work 40 hours, or make $70,000 a year working 70 hours, okay? You've heard the question, right? You've heard what I said. How many of you would rather work 70 hours for 70,000 or 40 hours for 40,000? How many would rather work 70 hours for 70,000? One. That's what I find. And most of you would rather work 40 hours for 40,000. Is that right? How many of you would rather do that? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You are different. You are different, and healthily so. There are other things in life than working, and that, I mean, in business. And that's healthy. Now, if you're going to use those hours, in our foundation, we set up this deal where we're getting people to spend an hour a week reading to children in the schools. If it's because you don't want to work, I might be a little concerned. But if it's because you have a sense of social responsibility, then that's great. But incidentally, you're no different from the kids at the University of Texas. They voted the same way all the way through. And you know, it's really amazing to an old man like me who came out of the Depression. Did you ever work 70 hours in a week? Tell the truth now. Lots of times, right? All right.
Two last questions. We get to do last question.
I want some of the girls. What is the matter with these girls here today? Huh?
Yes, here we are.
Yeah.
In your question, would I rather work 40 hours a week for 40,000 or $70,000 a year?
Yeah.
70 hours. To me, it would depend on what I was doing in either one.
Well, I agree with that. Now, it takes a woman to set me straight always. You know, that reminds me, I'll close with this wonderful little story I did. They tell a story about this, these two friends. They're coming from different sides on the sidewalk, and walks up and he says, "Jake, you just look awful. What is your problem?" He said, "Well, I've just got a lot of problems." He said, well, Jake, what is the problem?" He said, "Well, look, 3 weeks ago, my cousin died. He left me $10,000. Yeah. Says, 2 weeks ago, I had died and she left me $50,000. Yeah. The problem. Said, well, last week, my grandfather died and he left me $500,000. He said, well, Jake, what is the matter? What's the problem? He said, this week, nothing. It's been a fun being with you. Thank y'all very much.